With it being a glorious sunny day, I think it's time to get the Fiat out. This is the first trip out since June last year, and it started up on its original petrol, pretty much first time of asking, and now we're cruising along on an evening child pickup taxi service. Lovely evening to be cruising out in my 1969 Fiat 500. On the roads, the Fiat's quite sweet and tight to drive, corners nicely. Even on the original setup, the brakes are quite sharp. They're not the quickest, but drums all round, they do the job really nicely. Gear change is quite slick, despite the fact that this car retains its original fully crash 500 gearbox. The lights, even though they're original, are completely stock and are perfectly functional. They don't blind people, and you can see where you're going. So you have to double declutch. So each time you change gear, you've got to actually double declutch in order to be able to change gear. So it's in neutral and then into fourth. And then we're back up to 40 miles, 50 miles an hour again. When driving the car, you've got this nice slim steering wheel that's the original and cleaned up nicely. And most of the controls are in the steering binnacle at the front. You've got a horn in the middle of the steering wheel, and then you've got an indicator lever, and then you've got lights, which I always remember as small, bigger, even bigger, which is what gives you the main beam. You have just two indicator lights. You have a main beam on the left hand side of the binnacle, and you have an indicator on the right hand side, and then you have a selection of switches. This turns the ignition on and off. The first one turns the panel lights on the speedo on and off. This turns the lights on and off, full stop, and this one operates the windscreen wipers. The only other control this really basic Fiat has is this little push switch under here. This rather quirky device is actually the windscreen washer. It's a little vacuum pump, and when you push it, it actually sucks the fluid out of the washer bag in the boot, and you can see just squirts it straight up onto the windscreen. Other than that, the driving controls are pretty basic. You don't have a petrol gauge, you just have a speedometer, you have an indicator to tell you when the lights are on, and you have a flashing warning light to tell you when the fuel is getting low. And that's your lot. This 1969 Fiat 500F has been rebuilt from an absolute wreck. In total, it took over 17 years to finish, although in actual fact, it only took about 8-9 weeks of work. Solid, of course. The car is powered from a rear-engined, 2-cylinder, 500cc engine, or at least originally it was a 499cc. This one is actually slightly bigger, as it has 126 pistons, barrels and bores. It does have an electronic ignition, but it still has its original dynamo. This car was so rotten that even this inside engine panel had to have some repairs, and the one at the back corner was actually completely missing and had to be cut off a scrap car. The front end, the boot, is accessed from this inside catch. That allows the bonnet to be opened up, and it catches on the little bonnet catch at the back of the bonnet. The majority of what you see is the fuel tank. There is no fuel gauge, there is just a fuel low light connected here, and this is where you fill the car up. The original jack is still with the vehicle, as is the original toolkit. And actually, I don't need to carry much more than what's in here. Amazingly, although I do carry some other metric spanners, these 2 spanners service all the nuts and bolts you could want on the car. This will take the spark plug out, this will do the wheel nuts, and I popped this in as an extra, but I'm not sure what should have been in there originally. The brakes on this car are still a single circuit, along with the highly coloured wiring loom, which Fiat seems to use. No rhyme nor reason, certainly not like the Lucas style that it used to on British cars. The windscreen has this water bag, which is pumped via a little vacuum pump. And obviously the front spare wheel sits down here, and right underneath the manuals that you see here is the battery. And I've fitted a battery cut-off switch here. There isn't a huge amount of room in the boot, but you can fit a small squashed bag in there and a overnight bag, but it is a little bit tight for space. I've also fitted the horn in the slightly earlier position up inside the bonnet so that it doesn't get rusty and horrible, and I've just rerouted the wires. This on this car should actually be underneath where it gets all the muck and the crud on it, so I moved it back to this original position. When I restored the car, headlamps were quite hard to find. Fortunately, I went to Italy on 2 occasions and brought back a whole pile of left-hand drive headlamps with good reflectors. It seemed a little bit criminal, but I actually knocked the glass out of the left-hand drive headlamps and very carefully cut the crusty, rusty reflectors off my right-hand drive headlamps and married the 2 together. So I have virtually unobtainable right-hand drive headlamps. Despite the fact how rotten my car is, it retains its original body number and its original plaque from the Fiat factory, even though quite a lot of this front end had to be cut off and rebuilt. Although my car does not go an awful long way, I do carry a couple of spare belts because my belts wear quite rapidly. I carry the original set of points and a spare cap just in case, and the only other proper spare I carry is a gear linkage because I never actually replaced mine, and if it breaks it means you've got no gears. Inside the car, it is very basically appointed. It is a 4-seater, although you might struggle to get 2 adults in the back, and I fitted little lap belts for when my children were small. I'm not quite 6 foot, but I can sit in the car quite nicely. And the large sunroof operates really nice and easily, just by undoing the catch and folding the roof back. The roof does of course increase the wind noise, but it also allows a very airy driving position. The dashboard has the speedo binnacle a couple of indicator lights, a cluster of lights that operate along with the ignition on switch, and this cardboard binnacle that goes underneath. These tend to wear and rot quite easily, and this one's off an Italian car. The rear seat will actually fold flat. If you undo the little rubber clap at the top, you can fold the whole seat forward, and that gives you a nice hard surface to put bags and such like on. You can see it's fairly utilitarian, and even this rear insert here is moulded plastic. The car is very basic. There is no headlining, just this sound deadening mat. The rest of it is just sprayed body colour, and even the carpets down the bottom are moulded rubber matting. Everything is done to a cost, and you can see where Fiat have been particularly cheap. Their cost cutting even led to there actually only being 5 pieces of glass in this car. So the windscreen and the rear screen are obviously 2 pieces of glass, but if you look carefully at the side screens, these and the door glass and the front quarter light, they're actually the same on each vehicle. So these 3 panes here are actually exactly the same, just flat pieces of glass that fit each side of the car. Cost cutting down to the very basics. Starting the car, particularly when it's warm like it is no real problem. We need to turn the ignition on, just the first switch here. We do then get an indication here with the generator and the oil light coming on that the ignition is on. And then down here we have the choke on the left and the starter on the right. And all you need to do is to pull the starter and the engine will whir into action. Slight depression of the accelerator, particularly when it's warm, will just make sure that it starts nicely. And in winter, there's actually a hand throttle under here that you can pull. So you can leave that operating so that it will warm up a little bit nicer, almost like cruise control. The foot brake operates the hydraulics. There's actually a master cylinder immediately behind there, fed from the reservoir you saw earlier in the bonnet. But the clutch on this side is cable operated, so it's pulling a cable down this main central trunk. Likewise, the accelerator pedal here actually has a bar that goes under the rubber carpet and into this control area, and this trunk down the middle has all the wires and everything that go down to the back of the car, including the gearbox linkage. You might think on such a basic car that Fiat wouldn't bother with a heater, but with an air-cooled engine it's quite easy to redirect the coolant air that comes off with this little flap here. So this is closed, it says so on the rubber carpet, and this is open, it says so here on the rubber carpet. You can just see that printed into the rubber matting. When this is open, it directs air down this central channel to the point where sometimes the handbrake and these controls, and certainly this area where my hand is, gets quite warm to touch. The air is blown all the way down this central trunk, and then it goes up these little, what I call an elephant's trunk, and then goes up these individual hoses. At this point here, it either goes straight up to the windscreen vents here, so it blows up onto the screen. But if you want air directly onto your legs, you can open these little plastic taps here to partially